Then she heaved a theatrically disappointed sigh. Do you understand now? You can win against me if you don't use martial arts. If you understand, then stop holding back and fight for real. Those were the brutal words he heard. The reply spilled out of Brain's mouth unconsciously. You monster. Sholtia responded with a pure, innocent smile, like a flower in full, glorious bloom. That's right. So you finally understand. I am a merciless, cruel, inhuman, and lovely monster. She let go of his blade and sprang away. She was back where she started, probably not even a fraction of an inch off. Are you almost ready? She smiled playfully at him. A hot flash of anger filled Brain's mind upon hearing the same words as before. How much can she belittle me? Then, a shudder because he realized she was at leisure to make fun of someone who had supposedly reached the limits of human strength. Should he run? Brain valued his life. If he couldn't win, he should run away to fight another day. It was enough to stay alive and win in the end. He still thought he had room to get stronger, but even if he chose to run, there was nothing he could do about the gap in their physical abilities. He carefully selected his target, making sure she couldn't detect where he was looking. He would go for her legs. He would destroy her ability to move quickly, and then all he needed to do was run away. He would stay out of the range of those hands that had caught his critical hit earlier. He would attack an area that was difficult to defend. Having decided that, he continued staring at her neck and put his sword back in its sheath. With domain activated, he could slice through his target, even with his eyes closed. So using his eyes for a feint was the obvious move. Here I come. Sholtia once again began her approach. Whereas before he had been waiting eagerly for her to enter his domain, this time it was the reverse. Ideally, he didn't want her to get that far. How did you get so faint-hearted? He desperately scolded himself. But try as he might to rouse himself, he didn't get fired up. His will to fight was like a flame that had run out of fuel. He clicked his tongue and observed Sholtia's steps with domain. 3 steps, 2 steps, 1 she was in range. Brain's field of vision, as he fixed his eyes on her neck, included the borderline sneer on Sholtia's face. He would aim at one point the ankle of her right foot as she stepped forward. He slashed his sword down, managing to raise the attack speed a fraction. He cast off any mental pressure and confirmed that he was moving faster than last time. If he had been on the receiving end, he wouldn't have been able to block against this speed. This LL work. He was about to cut off that foot, peeking out from beneath her skirt, right at the slender ankle befitting such a young girl, when his hand slipped off the hilt of his katana. With his gaze fixed to one place, Brain didn't see what had happened. But his special perception abilities from domain alerted him that his beloved katana had fallen to the ground. A high heel was holding it down toward the back of the blade. It seemed impossible, but it was true. The katana had slipped from his hand because the impact of her stepping down on it had traveled down the blade. There was one reason he didn't want to believe it. Even in his most highly attuned state of focus, he hadn't been able to detect it. Not even from within his domain, which he was so proud of. She was close enough to touch. From that distance, Sholtia looked down on him icily. The terrible oppression of her gaze made it feel like the atmosphere alone would crush him. He breathed roughly in and out. Every pore in his body was pouring sweat. A wave of nausea assailed him. His vision wavered. He made it through so many fights. He escaped the jaws of death a pile of times. Compared to his current situation, all his past battles felt like pale imitations. It was as if everything up until now had been childish play. The heel of his sword lifted and Sholtia sprang back. Are you almost ready, NGH? He felt despair more than anything this third time she called to him. He expected her to say, here I come, but she said something else. Are you incapable of using martial arts? Her voice contained pity and surprise, and Brain just inhaled. He couldn't respond. What should he say? Should he play the fool and say, well, I used them, but you broke through them like they were nothing? Biting his lower lip, he picked up his beloved katana. Could it be that perhaps you're just not so strong? I thought you were stronger than the ones by the entrance, but you seem my apologies. My strength scale measures in yards. I can detect differences that amount to a fraction of an inch or two. His unceasing effort. He had overestimated his ability when fighting Gazef. He hadn't pushed himself at all, and he lost to a man who had. That's why the defeat had been incorporated within him. It had become a part of him. Everything he was after, clawing himself up from there and training for real. The monster before his eyes mocked his entire existence. Something's wrong. Up until now, he had slayed every monster, no matter how lightly they took him, no matter how much stronger they were. He slayed them all, so why? His thoughts welled up that far, but he suppressed the rest of them. He roared and slashed at Sholtia. He put all his power and weight into his katana, aiming it at her as she watched him quizzically. This slash, mobilizing every muscle in his body, could have sliced a human in two from head to toe, whether they wore a helmet or not. He thought that maybe he had caught her, since she didn't try to dodge his incoming blow. She simply watched the white flash as it came down, but the impossible scene he witnessed just before dismissed that thought immediately. It wasn't going to be this easy to kill her. A moment later, his hunch was proven correct. A sharp noise rang out. Brain saw another unbelievable sight. Sholtia had swiftly parried with the 3/4 of an inch fingernail of her left pinky. It didn't even look like she had put any effort into it. There was a gap in her fist. Her pinky finger was gently curled. She had parried his all-out attack with a movement that could not even be considered playful. His attack could slice through full plate armor, break swords, and pierce shields. Frantically gathering up his shattered will, he tensed his arm to stop the vibrations from the impact. He brandished his sword once more. Again, Sholtia blocked it without really trying. Therefore, she yawned ostentatiously. With her free right hand, of course, she covered her mouth. She seemed to be deliberately looking up at the ceiling. She was no longer even giving Brain the time of day. Still, Brain's blade continued to be repelled by her one pinky finger. A howl emerged from his throat. No, not a howl, a scream. Horizontal swipe blocked, diagonal swipe blocked, forward swipe blocked, diagonal strike blocked, vertical strike blocked, horizontal strike blocked. No matter the angle, no matter where he aimed, all his attacks were blocked. It was like his katana was drawn to wherever the nail was. At this moment, Brain finally understood absolute strength. Even if he worked hard, even if he had natural ability, there were beings whose realm he would never be able to approach, much less reach. Oh, are you tired? But your nail clipper is rather dull, wouldn't you say? At those impatient words, Brain's sword hand stopped. Could he chip away at a mountain with a katana? That would be impossible. Any child could answer that question. So could he win against Sholtia? Any warrior who faced her would know the answer. There was no way to win. There was no way a mere man could win against an opponent with strength beyond human conception. Only those who were more than human could put up a fight. Unfortunately, Brain was only a warrior who had reached the pinnacle of human capability. That's right. No matter how much effort he put in, from the moment he was born as a human, he would never be anything more than an infant waving around a stick. I put in so much effort. That word doesn't mean a thing. I was created strong, so it was never necessary to strive for strength. Brain laughed. All his hard work meant nothing. Why was I so cocky? Why did I think I was so talented? His arms and legs felt so heavy it was like being pressed between weights. Ah, what are you crying for? Did something upset you? He knew Sholtia was saying something, but it was as if she was saying it somewhere far away, and he couldn't hear. Swinging around a heavy iron rod had been pointless. It was even more pointless when the blisters on his hands popped doing it. Jogging in heavy armor had also been pointless. Facing monsters all alone and just barely clinching victory all those times had also been pointless. Everything was pointless, and his life was also pointless. Before a truly strong opponent, Brain was no different from the unskilled weaklings he used to sneer at. I am an idiot, are you satisfied? Shall we finish up here soon? She drew nearer, snickering, with her pinky finger up, and Brain cried out. But it was no longer the cry of a warrior as before. It was practically the wail of a child. He set off running, showing his back to the enemy. He'd seen enough of Sholtia's physical ability to make him sick, so he figured she would catch up to him instantly. But he didn't think about that. No, he wasn't at leisure to think about it. He just showed her his wide-open back and ran desperately toward the back of the cave, his face twisted into a tear-streaked grimace. The innocent voice of a little girl, part sigh, part sinister, called after him, "Now we're going to play tag. You're just full of games, aren't you? Well, let us have fun then, shall we? Ah. Cold air blew across the hall. It came through the gaps in the barricade, brushing at the bodies of the 42 remaining sowers of death. This hall was usually used as a place to eat. That was because it was the most spacious area in the cave. but now it had been converted into an improvised fortress. The cave served as the mercenaries' hideout. It had a long, thin, open area at the far back. Sub-caves opened up radially from there. Those were used as private rooms, weapon storage, and food cellars. The men always made this their last line of defense in a raid. If they could hold this area, they could take on their foes in a controlled way. They didn't build the fortifications out of any fancy materials. First, they tipped a plain table onto its side. Then they stacked wooden crates against it to make a simple barricade. Then they strung up ropes between the barricade and the entrance to the hall. The ropes were about the height of a human's stomach. By doing that, they obstructed any enemy attempts to charge them. They also kept the invaders from pressing right up against the barricade. Behind this defensive base, almost everyone was standing by with a crossbow. They were split into center, right, and left wings. Even if it became a ranged fight, considering the width of the entrance compared to the size of the hall would have the overwhelming advantage. Because the sowers of death were fanned out, the enemy would be taking fire no matter where they tried to assault. Even an area of effect attack would be far from effective. They were using the tactic of crossfire, based on the principle of mutually supporting strongpoints. It was that simple, but the men still had anxious looks on their faces. Despite being in a base that would allow them to fight on an equal footing, even if they were outnumbered, the chain links of their mail shirts jangled from the men's shivers. It wasn't very warm in the cave. In the summer it was quite comfortable, but the chills assaulting them now were a little different. The loud laughter coming from the front of the cave echoed off the walls. It wasn't even possible to tell if it was a man or a woman cackling. It chilled them to their very cores. Brain Unglaus was the strongest member of the Sowers of Death. Some had said that if he was intercepting, they didn't even need the barricade. But the sound of that laughter blew away those opinions. An opponent who could defeat Brain, no one like that existed. That's what they thought until now. Brain's strength was on another level. Not even the Empire's knights could match him, and neither could monsters. He could kill ogres in one blow and jump solo into a mob of goblins, mowing them all down. If they couldn't call a man likely capable of taking off the heads of all the other Sowers of Death the strongest, what could they call him? And now he had lost. What could it mean? The fact that someone was laughing in a fight against Brain could mean only one thing. Everyone knew what it was, but no one could say it. All they could do was look wordlessly at one another's faces. Everyone there stared silently toward the entrance to the hall, the entrance to the cave. The tension grew bit by bit, and then there came the sound of someone running. It grew gradually louder. Someone swallowed hard audibly. Silence reigned in the hall, except for the overlapping sounds of crossbows being drawn. The one who flew through the entrance as the mercenaries watched was a man out of breath. It was a miracle no arrows flew at him. Brain, the head of their mercenary gang, shouted. A second later the hall exploded into a cheer, a howl of happiness, because the invader had surely been defeated. They slapped their neighbors' shoulders, and voices praising Brain echoed. They cheered his name over and over. During the applause, Brain just stood there in the entrance, holding his sword limply in one hand, looking quietly out over their faces. No, something was wrong. He was looking for something else. The cheers petered out. It sounded as if they were dampened by Brain's unusual attitude. He ran at the barricade. Hey, wait just a sec, we'll move it. He ignored the voice and proceeded to force his body through. After breaking in as if he didn't have a moment to lose, he set off running again without a word. The bandits looked on, shocked. He opened the door to a cave used as a storehouse and leaped inside. Was there something he left in there? Who knows, he did seem different, but he wasn't crying right. Even looking at the door that had been loudly slammed behind him, they still didn't understand the mysterious events they had just witnessed. Among them, one man twisted his face into a grimace, the leader of their gang. Only he and Brain knew the truth, but he didn't have time to see if his thought was right. With a clicking noise, someone else appeared in the entrance to the hall. Of course they didn't recognize her. No one in the gang knew her. That meant she was the invader causing so much trouble. The stir among them died down instantly. This couldn't be true. It would change the meaning of Brain showing up here. If the invader was alive, he had run away. There was only one invader. She had an oddly stooped posture. Her frame wasn't large. It was more like a little girl's frame. Her arms hung limply at her sides. Her head was lowered. completely hiding her face. Considering the position of her head and shoulders, it seemed like she had a neck 3 times as long as a normal person as she slowly entered the hall, paying no mind to the fact that she was dragging her long silver hair along the ground. Her well-sewn dress was so black it looked like she was clad in darkness. No one said a word. Her appearance was too bizarre. The chill in the air threatened to stop their hearts. Her head moved slowly. Her face was entirely covered by her fine silver hair, but behind it 2 red lights burned. They slowly flattened into needle-like lines. Everyone understood unfortunately she was smiling. In a swift movement, the horrifying girl raised her head. She had a shapely face, but for anyone who knew what she had looked like a moment ago, it would have been nothing creepier. Her features were so regular that her face seemed almost like a mask made by an extremely talented top-class artist. "Good evening. My name is Sholtia Bloodfallen. Is this the end of the line? Are we done playing tag?" The girl Sholtia, saying things they didn't understand, scanned the room, but perhaps because she didn't find the one she was looking for, her beautiful face frowned. No one dared speak up, and the girl's voice rang through the hall once more. "Is it hide and seek this time?" She snickered. She must have found it quite funny, because she continued laughing with downcast eyes. Her long silver hair hid her face. As the mercenaries held their breath, unsure how to deal with the strange situation, Sholtia's laughter grew louder and louder. "Ah-ha-ha-ha, ah-ha-ha-ha, ah-ha-ha-ha, ah-ha-ha-ha." She slowly lifted her head as she laughed. The sight of her face gave the bandits a shock, as though their hearts were being squeezed. It felt like ice had been injected into their veins. There was no beauty there. Her eyeballs had been dyed completely blood-red by the color that oozed from her irises. Her mouth, which had been lined with pretty white teeth, now sprouted multiple shark-like rows of countless long white things reminiscent of syringes. Her oral cavity, gleaming an obscene pink, sparkled moistly, and clear drool spilled out of the corners of her mouth. "Ah-ha, ha-ha, ha-ra-ha-ha-ha." With a smile that split her face open ear to ear, she laughed. The timbre of her laughter was like an off-key bell ringing out over and over. The air was practically shrieking with trembling tension. Even considering they were in a cave, this echo was unnatural. It was almost as if the atmosphere itself couldn't handle her laughter and had to join in. Was she a girl, a monster, a beast? They were all wrong. She was an embodiment of fear. The scent of blood on her breath was so thick they could smell it even at a distance. Even the air seemed to be turning red. Wah! A scream went up. One of the mercenaries, driven by terror, fired his crossbow. The arrow sliced through the air and stuck itself deep in Sholtia's chest. She swayed slightly from the impact. Fire! At the sound of their leader's voice, the mercenaries came to their senses. They wanted to deny their fear and fired their crossbows all at once. The bolts flying downrange sounded almost like rain as they pierced Sholtia's body. There had been a total of 40 crossbow bolts launched. 31 hit their target. Each one bit deeply into her body, which was to be expected given that at this range they could pierce even metal armor. There were even 4 burrowed into her head. If she was human, these wounds would have been fatal. Someone whispered, "We did it," laying bare the hope they all clung to. She was still standing, but she was a pincushion of crossbow bolts. Common sense said she had to be dead, but even if they could think that logically, the spark known as fear still smoldered in a corner of their minds. Spurred on by something like animal instinct, the mercenaries loaded another volley. Then Sholtia moved. Like a conductor raising her baton, she raised both arms and then slowly opened them. The projectiles stuck in her gradually began to move. Then they were spat out of her body. Finally, they landed in the dirt. None of them had any blood on them, nor was there any wear on the arrowheads. It was exactly as if they had never been used. She smiled. It was an ugly smile. It could perhaps be better described as a derisive grin. Shrieks of fear went up here and there. As if that was the push they needed, countless arrows once again sliced through the air and rushed into Sholtia. An eyeball was pierced. Her neck was shot through. Her stomach was skewered, and her shoulder was gouged. In the midst of all that, she seemed no more put out than she would be by a light rain. "You guys are trying so hard, but that doesn't work on me." She took one step forward and then leaped. The ceiling was about 16 feet tall. After jumping high enough to easily touch it, she floated elegantly down on the other side of the barricade. Her high heels clacked on the floor. Then all the bolts fell out of her body. Her neck made a grinding noise as she turned her head, and she looked at the mercenaries behind her loading their crossbows. She rushed and threw a punch. She didn't even use her hips, it looked like she had just thrust out her hand. Even so, its speed was on another level, and its destructive power was from another dimension. Her fist went effortlessly through the mercenary's body and slammed into the barricade. With a noise like an explosion, the wood was crushed, and splinters went flying in every direction. In the heavy silence that had descended, the noise of the falling wood scraps echoed throughout the hall. The shocked mercenaries stopped loading their crossbows and stared at Shaltia. She inserted a finger into the glob of blood floating above her head.